በቤት ሠራተኞች ጉዳይ ያተኮረ ውይይት ተካሄደ። መቀመጫውን አዲስአበባ ያደረገው የስዊድን ኤምባሲ ከዓለም አቀፉ የሥራ ድርጅትና ሙቭመንት ጋር በመተባበር በቤት ሠራተኞች ላይ ያተኮረ የውይይት መድረክ ግንቦት 7 ቀን 2011 ዓ.ም በአዲስአበባ ኸርባን ማዕከል አካሄደ። የውይይት መድረኩ የተከፈተው በስዊድን አምባሳደር ቶርቦጃን ፔተርሰን፣ የሠራተኛና ማህበራዊ ጉዳይ ሚኒስትሯ ዶክተር ኤርጎጎ ተስፋዬና በዓለም አቀፉ የሥራ ድርጅት የኢትዮጵያ ኃላፊ ሚስተር አሌክሶ ሙሴንዶ በተገኙበት ነው። ውይይቱን ተከትሎም የቪዲዮ ውድድር ውጤት ይፋ የሆነ ሲሆን የጓዳ ታሪኮች የተሰኘ በቤት ሠራተኞች ህይወትና የሥራ ሁኔታ በተመለከተ የተሰራ ቪዲዮ በአሸናፊነት ተሸልሟል። በስነ ስርዓቱ ላይ የመንግስት ባለስልጣናት፣ የዲፕሎማቲክ ማህበረሰብ አባላት፣ መንግስታዊ ያልሆኑ ድርጅቶች ተወካዮች፣ የዩኒቨርሲቲ ተማሪዎችና ጥሪ የተደረገላቸው እንግዶች ተገኝተዋል።
Empowerment of women and girls through productive employment and decent work. That's the wording in the strategy. In addition to that, my government is a firm believer that decent working conditions is a prerequisite for a happy and stable society, as well as a basic human right. Some of you might have heard about something called the Global Deal. The Global Deal was an initiative by our Prime Minister Stefan Löfven in 2016. The very essence of the Global Deal is promoting inclusive growth and prosperity through an important tool we call social dialogue. Social dialogue basically means that employers and unions, different parties in the labour market and government meet to discuss issues and challenges in the labour market and try to find solutions to some of the terrible problems we've seen in the film, for example. When we talk about decent working conditions, and after having viewed the film, I don't have to reiterate this, that domestic workers is one of the groups globally, all over the world, not only in Ethiopia, that are most vulnerable to exploitation, violence, harassment and forced labour. According to ILO data, in 2013 there were about 67 million domestic workers in the world. Millions of women and girls, because most of them, as we know, are women and girls. Millions of them around the world turn to domestic work as one of the few options available for them in order to provide for themselves and their families. This is especially true in countries where unemployment rate is high and education is low. Given that women are concentrated in the domestic work sector in many countries, working in this sector is so important and an extremely important tool to promote equality between men and women in the world of work, as well as to fight violence against women and to promote decent work in Ethiopia, Sweden and around the world. That is why we have got involved in this project, and why when Blene Sahido, one of the co-founders of the Yellow Movement and members of the embassy, Swedish Embassy Gender Network, brought this idea to us last year, we thought it was an extremely good idea. And I'm so happy to see that we are here today and realizing that idea. Although the domestic work sector absorbs a large amount of workforce, the sector, as we all know, I think, and it was obvious to all of us when we watched the movie, it is characterized by arbitrariness, discrimination and sexual harassment. The deplorable working conditions that we unfortunately often see in this sector and the violations of workers' rights are similar across very many countries. Governments have sometimes found it difficult to regulate the sector since domestic work is carried out on private premises. As a result, it is very difficult to regulate this work and to address some of the atrocities we see. So how can we improve this? Well, of course, there is no one size fits all solution to this, given how complicated the sector is. But we believe that strong laws and policies are important. Actually, last month, my government ratified the Convention number 189, which calls for domestic workers to enjoy access to decent working conditions and fundamental protection like other workers. Secondly, and that I think is where this project comes in, it's to a large extent about changing attitudes. The perception towards domestic work and domestic workers is very poor. As most of domestic workers have limited literacy, we believe that the work should be recognized and respected as any other work. I truly hope that today's session and the debate we try to encourage and start here today and other sessions in this event will inspire and contribute to change some attitudes and make us realize that it is guided by attitudes that are wrong to a big extent. Before I conclude and give the floor to my colleagues, I would like to thank a lot of people being involved in making this event happen. First of all, as I mentioned several times, the Yellow Movement, and the Yellow Movement team, in particular Rediet Kefiale, Ruth Jitterberg, Emerit Okubai. I hope I got that right. Torbjörn is always good to be named because no one can say Torbjörn if you're not a Swede. So that's for I excuse if I made a mistake. The Community for Volunteers for the World, an Italian NGO that is doing a tangible work on domestic workers collaborating with the federal and regional governments of Ethiopia. The team at the Urban Center, the ILO team, of course, and finally my own team at the Embassy, of course. Before we move on to see the exhibition, I would like to give the floor to the ILO Director Alexio Mosindo, one of our partners in this. So, Mr. Very welcome and thank you for the strong partnership. I give the floor to you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for giving ILO as a partner for this project. And I think my starting point when we are talking of domestic workers is to look at the national economy in Ethiopia, in Africa, and across the world. When we look at the statistics that are reported every year, we get to know what is happening in the agriculture sector, in the manufacturing sector, tourism sector, mining sector, and so on. But we never get data on what is happening in the care economy. The ambassador just said, ILO data says there are 67 million people in the domestic workers sector. How many do we have in Ethiopia? When we announce, when government announces, when we do research on economic growth, do we include the contribution of domestic workers? Second thing we might ask ourselves, for all of us, or let me say the majority, who are here, who do we have children? The reason why we can go to work and work confidently and safely is because we have left domestic workers at home. The reason why after this event, we all expect to get home and there will be food on the table is because we have domestic workers who are with us. The reason why we feel our properties are secure at our different places where we stay is because we have domestic workers with us. But when we count on workers, when we talk of decent work for workers, we do not consider these 67 million. When we consider the contribution to economic growth, for all of us to be able to contribute effectively to our various places of work, that significant contribution that our children are safe, somebody is taking our children to school, our properties are safe, it's all a contribution of domestic workers. It is for this reason, and amongst many other reasons, that the ILO took up a discussion to have an international labor standard on domestic workers. It was not an easy debate, as again the ambassador said, it's private residences, they are difficult to inspect. And how can ILO come up with a standard for domestic workers, for the informal economy? The Convention 189 has not yet been fully ratified, despite the fact that it represents 67 million people. There are a few countries, such as Sweden, that have ratified, but I would say within the continent of Africa, we have very few ratifications. It's a push that the ILO is having on ratifying decent work for domestic workers. What is decent work? Is it possible to have decent work for domestic workers when some of those in the informal economy don't even have decent work? I think our general answer from the ILO is yes. Our experience across the world is yes, it is possible. Let me just break down decent work into what it is from the ILO. We pin it a lot around 4 areas of work. 1, getting a job, employment. 2nd, getting a contract to be protected by national laws. I'm aware that we still have challenges in a number of African countries, but ILO does provide for domestic workers and other workers that possibility of a written or a verbal contract, but one needs to know what they are earning. Decent work is about working conditions. As you ask your domestic worker to clean, are you giving the right instruments to do the work? Are they secure in terms of the products, the chemical products, for example, they are using? Decent work is about dialogue, the global deal that has been talked about. Just to take that time to sit and explain not just the contract, even the work, the way you and I would like our employer to deal with us. Are those difficult things? They can be done. What are the indicators for a decent work? As ILO, with support from the government of Sweden, a few years ago, worked on indicators of decent work, where we included things like working time, things like wages, things like indicators for dialogue, work-family balance. I think we heard the story about 1 or 2 years lockdown. They are very simple indicators for domestic workers that as ILO, we believe without any additional costs, we can move towards that aspiration. What is our strategy as ILO to promote decent work for domestic workers? I think first is advocate for the ratification of Convention 189. With that ratification comes the domestication and having national institutions. Trade unions, we have settled. Do we have representatives for domestic workers to get their voices yet? Do we have an organization for employers of domestic workers for the employer's voice to be heard? The ILO strategy facilitates the organization and representation of domestic workers. Awareness raising and advocacy, part of what we are doing today. It's all around awareness raising and advocacy for domestic workers. And we also do work around developing a knowledge base. This is an area that is difficult to get information. And as ILO work towards that so that we learn from other countries, best practices, bad practices, and how we can improve on them. But the guiding is, of course, the ILO Convention 189. Second important thing is when you look at the statistics of domestic workers, it's skewed, it's basically feminization of the workplace. And one of the discussions we are having as ILO this June at the International Labour Conference is a discussion around addressing violence against men and women at the workplace. Statistics data across the region raise the issues more around harassment, particularly sexual harassment for domestic workers. What can we do to address that so that we promote decent work for domestic workers? Last point, specifically when we look at Ethiopia, is there is a lot of migrant workers, people looking for jobs elsewhere, particularly in the Gulf countries and across the borders, as domestic workers. What can be done to prepare them before they leave, as they leave? What capacity building activities can be done? As I know, again, we are trying on advocacy, on policy, to try and address that knowledge gap between domestic workers before they leave, when they leave, and also when they return. So basically, in short, we believe it is possible to have decent work for domestic workers. Who can make it possible? No one outside this room. It's us here who can start the process of promoting decent work for domestic workers. Thank you for making ILO a partner for this event, and we look forward to continue working with you to promote the agenda.
And an honor for me to be here amongst you and give this brief speech on the event entitled Making Decent Work a Reality for Domestic Workers, the Challenge and the Way Forward. Organized by Yellow Movement with support from ILO and Swedish Embassy. For the outset, I'd like to indicate that the event is timely when my country is undergoing multifaceted challenges in economy, political, and social affairs, that the working conditions of domestic workers should be given due attention, as it can bring noticeable leap in the transformation of the lives of many. Dear participants, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, domestic workers constitute an integral part of the labor force in Ethiopia. There is no detailed study, however. We know that there is quite a large number of domestic workers performing household services for an individual or a family, doing variety household activities. Most of us are relying on their service to manage our house, raise our kids, and take care of our elderly. Despite their contribution and demanding nature of their job, their contribution is undervalued. Also, legislation protecting domestic workers exists in Ethiopia. It's quite old. Currently, the available legal instrument that governs the employment relationship is the 1960 Ethiopian Civil Code. It largely depends on employment's sense of fairness. Most of the relationship between the domestic workers and the employers are family type and usually informal. The code did not take into account the current realities of domestic workers in Ethiopia. In view of this, the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs gave due attention to develop a regulation taking into account a suspicious and complex employment relationship. I'm pleased to inform you that one of the proposed amendments of the labor law includes provision stating that government will enact special regulation to address the working conditions of domestic workers. Thank you. The draft labor law is already approved by the Council of the Ministers, and is expected to be endorsed by the Parliament soon. We are aware that the regulations alone will not address the challenge faced by many domestic workers. In view of this, there is a plan to carry out research, dialogues to understand the problem of the sector, and design proper interventions with the involvement of all stakeholders. Today's discussion will therefore feed into our plans. Ladies and gentlemen, regulating domestic work is difficult. However, improving the working condition will not be if all of us who are employers of domestic workers start working the talk. I'm sure in this room, most of you would like to get immediate answer about when we are going to enact the labor law, but few will be ready to start a real conversation to take practical steps in improving the lives of the domestic workers. I'd like to take this opportunity to request all of you to take a minute to put yourself in the shoes of the domestic workers. Then I'm going to ask you this question. As an employer, are you respecting the rights and responsibilities of the domestic worker you are hiring as you expect your employers to do so? I'm not going to just expect an answer right now, because many of us want the service, but want to postpone the decision that we are going to make right away now. As an individual, all of us have the power to improve the lives of domestic workers. Let's all do our share as citizens of Ethiopia and as a human being. Before I conclude my remarks, I want to reconfirm that the Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs is committed to promote decent work for domestic workers. Thank you very much.